our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution calling for pauses and humanitarian corridors in the Gaza Strip. And Russia has called on the UN Security Council to put words into action regarding the resolution adopted yesterday advocating humanitarian pauses in Gaza. And the Director General of the World Health Organization has said that health facilities with their staff and patients must be protected, adding that only 1/4 of Al-Shifa Hospital is operational. And those were the major developments. Now the Food News edition. Good afternoon. On the 41st day of the barbaric Zionist aggression against the besieged Palestinian enclave, occupation fighter jets and artillery launched a series of raids at dawn today on the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza and the northern areas of Gaza City. Local sources reported that occupation aircraft bombed 2 houses in the Nusayrat camp, causing numerous martyrs and injuries. In addition, occupation aircraft carried out heavy airstrikes in Beit Lahia and near the Indonesian hospital in the north of the Gaza Strip. The occupation artillery is also bombing various areas of the neighborhoods of Gaza City, notably the Ramallah neighborhood, while besieging the city and preventing the movement of citizens and ambulances. The UN Security Council adopted a resolution calling for the establishment of pauses and humanitarian corridors in the Gaza Strip, victim since October 7 of a savage Zionist aggression, which has caused at least 11,520 martyrs and around 32,000 wounded, following a vote which received 12 votes in favor and 3 abstention. Saeed Bougazi has more.
The main decisions of the draft resolution presented by Malta concern a call for humanitarian truces and the urgent and extensive opening of corridors throughout the Gaza Strip for longer periods for a sufficient number of days to allow UN humanitarian agencies and other neutral humanitarian organizations, in accordance with international humanitarian law, full, prompt and safe access and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian assistance, facilitating the provision of essential goods and services important for the well-being of civilians, particularly children. This humanitarian aid also includes the provision of water, electricity, fuel, food and medical supplies, as well as carrying out urgent repairs to basic infrastructure and enabling urgent rescue and recovery efforts, including for children missing inside damaged and destroyed buildings, as well as the medical evacuation of sick and injured children and their carers. The same resolution called for a commitment under international law, notably international humanitarian law, with regard to the protection of civilians, particularly children. The same resolution requests the UN Secretary General to submit an oral report to the Security Council on its implementation at its next meeting mandated by the Security Council on the situation in the Middle East. It also requests the Secretary General to identify options to monitor effectively the implementation of this resolution as a matter of priority. Commenting on the resolution, the permanent representative of the State of Palestine to the UN, Riyad Mansour, noted that the Council has finally acted, but it should have called for a ceasefire a long time ago. It should have called for a ceasefire now.
And the representative of the Israeli occupation said it rejected the resolution, prompting the Palestinian representative Riyad Mansour to ask the UN Security Council members what they intended to do in the face of that defiance. And Russia has called on the UN Security Council to put words into action regarding the resolution adopted yesterday, Wednesday, advocating humanitarian pauses in Gaza. The permanent representative of Russia to the United Nations, Vasily Nebenzia, has said it is a shame that the Council, which has powerful and unique tools at its disposal, has only reached such a weak appeal. And at least 9 people were killed when Israeli warplanes struck fuel station in the central Gaza Strip today, where displaced Palestinians had taken shelter. The Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, has declared at a briefing in Geneva that the entry of the Zionist occupation army into Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza is absolutely unacceptable.
Israel's military incursion into Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City is totally unacceptable. Hospitals are not battlegrounds. We're extremely worried for the safety of staff and patients. Protecting them is paramount. WHO has lost contact with health workers at Al-Shifa hospital. But one thing is clear. Under international humanitarian law, health facilities, health workers, ambulances, and patients must be safeguarded and protected against all acts of war.
The WHO official said health facilities with their staff and patients must be protected, added that only 1/4 of Al-Shifa hospital is operational.
What we know is that only 1/4 of Gaza's hospitals are still functioning. 26 out of 36 hospitals are now closed, either due to damage, attacks, or because they have run out of fuel.
The Director General of the World Health Organization says it is deeply concerned about the safety of the medical staff and patients, as it had lost contact with the medical staff in Al-Shifa Medical Complex. Raids and clashes are still ongoing east of Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Dozens of Palestinians have been detained, and witnesses say Israeli forces have turned the area into a kind of military base, with soldiers seen raising Israeli flags over Palestinian homes. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that a ceasefire and addressing humanitarian problems are top priorities in the current attacks against the Palestinians. In an interview with Russia Today, the Russian diplomacy chief said Russia will make sure that Palestinians do not move to neighboring countries, stressing that the creation of a Palestinian state is inevitable.
Washington does not want to tie Israel's hands. The key reason I believe that Washington doesn't want this to stop the way which Israel doesn't like. But in historical terms, in sustainable settlement terms, the creation of Palestinian state is unavoidable. We all must take deep breath and think how we restore Gaza, how we make sure that no one is expelled from Gaza, that there is no movement into Egypt and into Jordan of all those who used to live in Gaza, because this is what worries our Egyptian and Jordanian friends. And this would, of course, ruin all the resolutions of the Security Council that Gaza is Palestine, together with the West Bank.
And that was the statement of Russian diplomacy chief Sergei Lavrov in an interview with Russia Today. Diplomats meeting in Algiers have stressed the imperative to put an end to the despicable Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip and the genocide perpetrated against defenseless Palestinian civilians, affirming the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the establishment of their independent state. Said Bouazi.
On the occasion of the 35th anniversary of the proclamation of the State of Palestine in Algiers, and on the sidelines of his participation in the Memory Forum, the ambassador of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to Algiers, Juan Bautista Arias Palacio, told the APS news agency that it is important to impose an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. I would like to send a message to the Palestinian people and the Arab nation. Palestine will always remain in our hearts. Let us put an end to the suffering of the Palestinian people, he maintained, calling on the leaders of states throughout the world to act by all possible means to enable a return to dialogue and negotiations with a view to ending the war and establishing a lasting peace. Recalling that Venezuela supports the two-state solution, the ambassador expressed his conviction that the victory of the Palestinian people was inevitable. The first secretary of the Russian embassy in Algeria, Sergei Klimov, reiterated his country's position on the Palestinian cause and the Zionist aggression in the Gaza Strip, saying that Russia's position has been inalienable and clear from the outset since 1948 and after the 1967 war in favor of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the establishment of an independent state. This is an unacceptable crime against civilians, hospitals and homes, he continued, quoting Russian President Vladimir Putin's statement that war is waged between men, not against women and children.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, 14 hours, 40 minutes, Algiers time. Clashes broke out yesterday, Wednesday, outside the Democratic Party's national headquarters in Washington between dozens of demonstrators denouncing the Biden administration's support for the Zionist aggression in Gaza and the police forcing the closure of the nearby offices of the U.S. Congress. According to photos posted on social media networks, demonstrators were wearing black T-shirts with the slogan, "Cease fire now." And back to the country now, still with the Palestinian thorny issue, though. A Palestinian ambassador to Algiers, Faiz Abu Aita, has said that the Palestinian Declaration of Independence in 1988 was one of the important stages in the history of Palestinian revolution. And this proclamation that was made in Algeria paved the way for the recognition of Palestine by international legitimacy. And you're still listening to Radio Algeria International. The Chief of Staff of National People's Army, Army General Said Chengriha, has visited the 72nd Unit of the Chinese Air Force on the fourth day of his official visit to the People's Republic of China. The Army General attended an aerial demonstration performed by members of the 72nd Unit of the Chinese Air Force before meeting with the base officials and receiving detailed explanations on the work of the air units and the training of crews and personnel in the field of military aviation. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has said from London that Algeria was ready to take new steps towards building a solid and dynamic partnership with the United Kingdom. The statement was made at a meeting at the Algerian Embassy in London with a group of British economic operators and businessmen and members of the Algerian British Business Council. Attaf underlined, said Algeria and the UK have reached high levels of cooperation in key areas that constitute the major part of bilateral relations, particularly in the areas of politics, security, culture, and economy. And now to the U.S. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping have concluded more than 4 hours of talks with a commitment to stabilize strained bilateral ties and restore some military communications. The two leaders met yesterday, Wednesday, for the first time in a year, 25 miles south of San Francisco. Writing on social media site X, Biden said there are critical global challenges that demand a joint leadership, and Chinese President Xi Jinping said, on the other hand, that planet Earth is big enough for the two countries to succeed. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, 14 hours, 43 minutes, Algiers time. I invite you now to listen to an interview conducted by Mohammed Khatel devoted to the Palestinian thorny issue.
The humanitarian situation in the Palestinian-occupied territories, notably in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, where an all-out aggression is being perpetrated, is literally catastrophic and unbearable for the innocent and defenseless Palestinians living in the enclave. To analyze the situation, we have the honor and pleasure to host Amnesty International's Senior Crisis Response Advisor, Donatella Rovera. Mrs. Rovera, welcome to Radio Algeria International.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Mrs. Rovera, Amnesty International has gathered new evidence of unlawful Israeli attacks which caused mass civilian casualties and must be investigated as war crimes. Could you give us more details, please, on that?
Yes, the Israeli army has been bombarding Gaza relentlessly day and night since the 7th of October. So today is day 16. There is no place throughout the Gaza Strip that is off limit from what we can see. It's small houses, larger buildings, all types of infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, medical facilities. So people have nowhere to go. They don't know where they could go to be protected. I've spoken every day with relatives of those who were killed, with people who survived the bombings, and basically it's the same situation time and time again. So entire families have been completely wiped out. In some houses, 3 generations, the grandparents, the parents, and the children. In some cases, the Israeli army calls the owner of the house, tells them to leave because they're going to bomb the house, and the whole neighborhood in those cases gets out. Those warnings tend to be very short, so people hardly have time to leave. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, there are no warnings. Many of the people who've been killed in these bombardments, and I'm talking about civilians, children, women, older people, they had already been displaced from their homes, either because they live in the north of the Gaza Strip and they were told by Israeli forces to move to the southern part of the Gaza Strip, or because they themselves simply felt that their homes were in an area that was too exposed, and they left and went to stay with friends and relatives in areas where they thought it was safer. And those houses too were bombed, and that's how so many people were killed. So the attacks are indiscriminate. They are carried out using weapons which have very wide impact radius, and so they cause a lot of destruction and they kill people way beyond the targeted areas. So the situation is extremely difficult for the people of Gaza. In addition, of course, to the disastrous humanitarian situation where people are lacking everything and people are drinking seawater, contaminated water, because there is no electricity in Gaza. There is no fuel which is needed to produce electricity, which is needed to purify the water. And so there is a danger of a public health crisis breaking out because of the fact that people do not have access to clean water.
Absolutely. So, Mrs. Rovera, Israel's aggression on Gaza is unprecedented because analysts and experts say that it didn't even happen during World War II, that hospitals and shelters and worship shrines have been targeted by the military forces. So Israel did it. So how can you evaluate this?
Well, I mean, I'm an investigator. Obviously, I investigate what is happening now, and the warfare techniques today are very different than what was available in World War II. We are now in the 21st century, and this is what we need to look at. The attacks that are indiscriminate, which Israeli forces have been carrying out in the Gaza Strip, those bombardments are in breach. They are in violations of international humanitarian law. They constitute war crimes, and that is what the international community should be reacting to.
Absolutely. So UNRWA has spoken of threats by Israel to attack its facilities if it doesn't accept to evacuate or empty those facilities and shelters which are housing Palestinian refugees, among them children, women, and elderly. So how should the international community react to that?
So first of all, just for the sake of accuracy, there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinians who are sheltering in the schools which are run by the UN agency UNRWA. There are 12,000 Palestinians who are sheltering in one of the hospitals in Gaza City. The threats by the Israeli army to strike any location north of Wadi Ghaza, the river, which is the point where Israel is demanding that all Palestinians from the north of the Gaza Strip move to the south of the Gaza Strip. That order is impossible to implement. Gaza is one of the most densely populated territories in the world. There just isn't space for the 1.5 million people from north of Gaza to move to the south, where the situation is incredibly dire. It's desperate. People are one on top of the other as it is. Secondly, Israel is also continuing to bomb various locations in the south of the Gaza Strip. So in the very same geographical area that Israel is demanding the Palestinians of North Gaza move to, in Deir el-Balah, in Khan Yunis, in Rafah, all of these places are being bombed. They were bombed yesterday. They were bombed this morning. So not only the demand for such a forced displacement of so many people is unreasonable, unacceptable, and not justifiable under international humanitarian law. But the fact is that the area that Israel is telling Palestinians to move to is under constant bombardment by Israeli forces as well. So it is not safe.
Absolutely, yeah. So speaking about the Rafah border crossing, which was eventually opened to let in humanitarian aid to the population of the besieged Gaza Strip, how could you assess the aid operation